Thank you very much. And allow me first to congratulate the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies on organizing this wonderful conference. Ephraim, Shlomo, and all the colleagues, Kol HaKavod. It's always nice to be back at Bar-Ilan University, and thank you very much for inviting me. Many of you, and this was already mentioned, many of you are probably familiar with Lily Gardner Feldman Scholarship on German-Israeli Relations. In her 1984 seminal work on German-Israeli relationship, titled The Special Relationship between West Germany and Israel, Feldman employs for the first time this theoretical framework of special relationship. And she tries really there to explain the relationship or the Federal Republic of Germany's behavior towards Israel. Now, Feldman categorizes special those relations that are characterized by mutual needs that cannot be satisfied by others, historical preoccupations, multi-layered contacts, and preferential treatment. Now, to my mind, the difficulty with Feldman's special relationship theoretical approach that many of us adopted and many of us actually mentioned and discussed here just today, the difficulty is really that while the relationship between Germany and Israel is certainly special, it really involves a peculiar dynamic of obligation that is difficult to generalize given Feldman's approach. Bluntly, there appears to be a dimension of specialness of the German-Israeli relations, peculiar to the Nazi legacy that is quite different than the other cases that Feldman examines, such as the British-American relations. So I would argue that the German-Israeli relationship is really in a need for a more exact explanation and for a better theoretical framework than just special relations. So what I'll try to do here is to invite you or to offer you a different theoretical approach to examine the German-Israeli relationship, but only in order to tell you that this is probably not a relevant theoretical framework in light of the future of German-Israeli relations. So I would like to discuss with you the diplomacy of guilt framework. Now, guilt, as we all know, is an emotional response to the belief that one has engaged in a behavior that is morally wrong, often resulting in the harm to others. Guilt is clearly an unpleasant emotion associated with the subdued solemn expression and display of remorse. Feelings of guilt include what June Price calls a nagging focus or preoccupation with the specific transgression, thinking of it over and over, wishing that they had behaved differently or could somehow undo the bad deed that was done. Later on, John Elster explains that the basic action tendency of guilt is make repairs to undo the bad one has caused. So, in other words, display of guilt demonstrate that an actor views its past behavior as wrong and that the actor is seeking to make amends. Now, the diplomacy of guilt theoretical framework is a response to being perceived as responsible for earlier wrongdoing. The diplomacy of guilt couples a discourse of guilt and apology with symbolic displays meant to reinforce an image of penance and responsibility. It also can involve substantive gestures of compensation that entail significant costs. The diplomacy of guilt seeks to convey remorse and make amends for past actions, thereby mitigating the harmful effects of past behavior on states' relations with others. As a state-level performance, the diplomacy of guilt is meant, or is a means for state actors to present an image that distances themselves from past transgressions, and it works to rehabilitate their state on the international stage. The diplomacy of guilt really takes individual remorse and penance as a model for coordinated state-level action to present a state as completely reformed. And state actors engaging in the diplomacy of guilt are drawing upon the significance that displays of remorse have within social life to convey a new image of present beliefs and intentions of their state. In sum, the diplomacy of guilt offers states a means to rehabilitate their image in light of past historical transgressions. It achieves this by projecting emotional behavior onto the international stage. This obviously can have positive political consequences where the stain of past misdeeds is coloring current relations with fellow states or other significant actors. The political incentives behind the diplomacy of guilt are the benefits that flow from an improved image. So the diplomacy of guilt also has an important interactive dynamic. The target of the diplomacy guilt plays a major role in determining these costs. And for only its acceptance or refusal of remorseful gestures that determine the success of the effort of the other actor. Now, I'm discussing with you this theoretical approach only in order to argue that up until today, German state actors were really engaged in the diplomacy of guilt in an effort to redeem their state's image. And this, in turn, generated the basis of expectations around which German-Israeli relations revolved for the past 50 years. Now, be that as it may, there are those who really argue that we already reached the point, or we are soon about to reach the point in the very near future, in which, on the one hand, German states actors will no longer engage in this sort of diplomacy, while on the other hand, Israelis would not accept these gestures. Now, regardless of whether we view such a turning point in a positive way or in a negative way, I believe that this is where this relationship is going. And what we will have in the not too distant future is what I would argue is a normal partnership with a very, very heavy burden of history. Now, you've already heard some of the figures from Ambassador Primor, and I believe that these figures were mentioned earlier today. As you know, 54% of among the group between 18 and 29 years in Germany think poorly of Israel. On the other hand, The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung conducted the survey just in the past year, and I'm sure Dr. Borchard will refer to it. We know that roughly 70% of the Israelis have a very, very positive attitude of Germany. And 28% of the Israelis, 1 in 4, have an extremely positive opinion of Germany. So I'm not sure that the German-Israeli relationship should be considered anymore a special relationship. Rather, I offered you the diplomacy of Gilt framework only in order to argue that we are heading towards a future of a normal relationship with a very, very heavy burden of history. Now, this, to me, might not be a negative future development. And it is really up to us to fill this relationship with new content, and above all, values that reflect on the current and the future societies of both Germany and Israel. Now, one crucial pillar of this new type of relationship, and here I absolutely agree with General Amidror, has to do with EU-Israeli relations. Now, unlike General Amidror, I don't see this future as a negative one. I believe that the European Union is not a realpolitik system. The European Union is a raison de système system. The European Union does not personalize relations with other countries. The European Union sees the logic and the interests behind its relations with third countries, and only for the reasons that General Amidror mentioned, I'm very positive about the future of EU-Israeli relations. The raison de système works completely different than the realpolitik system. Now, the second pillar of this new normal relationship must be the people-to-people relations. And I believe that this new normal relationship with a very, very heavy burden of history has to employ a second pillar that has to do with people-to-people contacts. We need more contacts with Germans. Germans need more contacts with Israelis. And the third pillar of this new sort of relationship must be science, networks, and infrastructures. And here I absolutely agree with General Amidror on the relevance and importance of science, networks, and infrastructure for the future, not only of the German-Israeli relationship, but also of the EU-Israeli relationship. Once again, thank you very much.